Hello, my name is Terry Tamminen, and I'm here to talk to you about the lost letters of William Shakespeare. Currently, I'm the CEO of the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, and prior to that, I was the Secretary of the California Environmental Protection Agency for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. But before developing my career as an environmental advocate, when I was a young man in college, I studied theater and wanted to be an actor, and I did have a few years of playing in theaters all over the world. And about 30 years ago, I was performing a one-man show on the life of William Shakespeare in London. Now, I thought I knew everything there was to know about Shakespeare. I had studied or performed in his plays, studied his sonnets, everything that there was to know about this amazing playwright and poet. But it turns out I didn't know nearly any of the real story. One afternoon in London, I was approached by an elderly lady who had seen the play more than once. She said she had some very old letters that she believed had been written by Shakespeare himself and offered to let me read them to see if they contained anything new about the Bard of Avon. Well, of course I said yes, although it seemed very unlikely that any such valuable letters would have been undiscovered for 400 years. But the possibility, as you might imagine, was too tantalizing to pass up. The woman I came to know as Miss B allowed me over several sessions to read and transcribe the letters, as long as I never pressed her for more information about her own identity or where the letters came from. I suspected she worked for a museum or royal archive and just didn't have permission to bring these old documents out of storage, even for a few hours at a time. And I speculate about her motives for doing so then in the prologue to The Lost Letters that you can read on my website. Well, after many months of studying these letters, I came to the conclusion that they had indeed been written by a young William Shakespeare, and now I want to share them with the world. Now, before we go any further, I'm sure some of you might be more than a little suspicious. Mysterious letters from an anonymous benefactor that just happened to have survived all these years and were written by William Shakespeare. I know it sounds far-fetched, and it took more than 2 decades since first seeing these letters for me to complete enough independent research to corroborate what was in the letters with other historic documents and contemporary references, and to be convinced myself. In fact, if you look at my office behind me, you'll see maps and lots of books and all kinds of other reference materials that I've had to parse together myself because there wasn't enough information in libraries and other commonly available sources to convince me about the quality of these letters. But that's why I'm launching this Indiegogo campaign, to raise the funds to publish the lost letters of William Shakespeare in print, as an ebook, and with a great professional group of actors in a very entertaining audiobook, so you can read what I read and judge for yourself. And here's a good reason to give these letters the benefit of the doubt and help me publish them for all to see. I sent the letters to Professor Alejandro Ribera, an innovative engineering professor at the University of Pennsylvania who had developed the linguistic algorithm that proved that Christopher Marlowe had a hand in writing Shakespeare's Henry VI. I asked him to run the letters through his analytical system. He compared the text to the letters of the known writing of Shakespeare, of Marlowe, of Ben Jonson, and other of their contemporaries, and the results came back with the highest match to William Shakespeare. Now, I don't want to overstate what Professor Ribeiro told me because his initial analysis needs much more work to be definitive, and that's another reason for this Indiegogo campaign. I want to fund this complete analysis and the studies of the letters to help further determine their connection to Shakespeare. But even this very preliminary finding was tantalizing validation that something of great historic and literary importance had been discovered. I've been truly moved by the contents of these letters, and on more than just an academic level. Shakespeare's life was not an easy one, and the choices he had to make, the struggles he endured, are intensely and sometimes overwhelmingly human. He left his hometown of Stratford at the age of 22. We learned in the letters he was working as a sort of a handyman for a troupe of traveling players. And he wrote these letters to his dear friend John Combe back in Stratford. They're full of an unusual amount of detail because, well, let me read the very first letter and you can hear for yourself why he wrote them at all. Here's a short excerpt. "Oh, John, my mind overflows from events unlooked for, with a group of men that I know now so briefly. Ink and paper are dear, but I would trade my last scrap of bread to keep this record of my journey, since I fear it will be a long one, and I would have my son know his father. Therefore, cause I make thee the book wherein my soul records the history of all its secret thoughts. Be thou, in mine absence, as a friend to my brothers, a son to my mother, a confessor to my wife, indeed the holder of all else I possess, but most of all, be thou as a father to my son. Take from these accounts what matter thou deemst fit for his youthful ears, saving the rest for his own divining when he is a man and better suited to understand the whips and scorns of time, labor, and love. Deny me not this favor, and God, I trust, will repay thee, even though it is mine own desire to do likewise in some fuller measure ere long. Yes, Shakespeare was afraid he might not return from his perilous journey, and he wanted his son Hamnet, who was 2 years old at the time that Shakespeare left home, to know the truth about his father when one day he too would become a man and face life-changing decisions for himself. Yes, we know that Shakespeare left his hometown of Stratford as a young man, but history doesn't record why he would leave a wife and 3 young children, or how he ended up several years later as a successful poet and playwright in London. The letters reveal that he left in a desperate attempt to restore his family's failing fortunes by sailing to the New World, where land and riches were being promised to anyone willing to make the dangerous journey and help colonize the English lands in the Americas. The letters tell us that the boat Shakespeare had tried to board was headed for the Roanoke colony, and as anyone who knows early American history can tell you, if he had been on that ship, we never would have heard from him again. It's a good thing he ultimately missed it, and you'll learn more about why in the letters. But there's so much more to be found in these letters. We hear about Shakespeare's relationship with his wife, his children, his parents, with all the players, the innkeepers, and tradesmen that he comes to know in his London life. We can see echoes of them, sometimes subtle and sometimes very plainly, in the characters he brought to vivid, starkly realized life in his plays. So without giving too much away, I can tell you that among other things, Shakespeare records a journey with this troupe of traveling players to the Danish court. He fights in a war. He meets a woman named Rosalind. Any of that sound familiar? If you know his plays, you know it does. And here's another brief excerpt, the moment when young Will Shakespeare beholds London for the first time. The King Arthur he mentions in this passage is a horse. We were soon upon the Southwark road for London Bridge, aching ankles reminding me of mine earthly lot, the 3 of us leading the wagon horses on foot, Mr. Burbage in the saddle of King Arthur just ahead. But even the bulk of King Arthur's rump could not blot from mine eyes the spectacle that now unfolded before us, as amazing to me as any that my dreams could conjure. The River Thames, wider by 10-fold than our River Avon, spreading her shimmering wings in either direction farther than a man could see or walk in a day's journey. Hundreds of wherries and rowing boats, great sailing ships and barges on the flood to our right. Upriver to our left were a multitude of craft, each engaged in his daily labors, overladen with boxes and barrels, bundles and passengers, oars sprouting like thousands of legs on hundreds of great wooden centipedes. Across this vast flood lay the city, no fearful stew of all man's iniquities, but 1,000 Stratfords, a human garden of every delicate and exotic fruit hitherto unknown to me, a vast expanse of structures along the river, great castles of stone adorned with banners and shiny spires, and rising up behind them were those very cloud-capped towers, gorgeous palaces and solemn temples of which Dick had foretold. Aye, all the great globe itself in one place. London. What a vivid description, huh? Well, if these letters were the equivalent of someone's tweets about what they had for lunch or what they saw by the side of the road, it wouldn't be worth sharing them, except perhaps among a few scholars of Elizabethan life. But the fact that they tell stories like this, and riveting and complex story of the life of the world's most famous playwright, starting when Shakespeare moves to London with this company of players and ending when Titus Andronicus premieres, marking Will's first foray into full-blown theatrical success. They also illuminate the language, culture, politics, the values and prejudices of a period that forged the ancestors of modern-day America, and in doing so, shine a light not only on who Shakespeare really was, but how he and his contemporaries made us who we are today. So I invite you to have a hand in helping the world get to know the real William Shakespeare, to bring him to life again and let him speak for himself after 400 years in speculation by historians, theater lovers, and even skeptics who claim he didn't exist. In his own words, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Shakespeare wrote that about someone he loved. I think it's time we return the favor, don't you? For more information about my discovery, my research into their authenticity, all the questions I asked, and I'm sure you will, all the doubts that everyone would have, and the background of these amazing letters, please visit our website, www.shakespeareletters.com. And thank you for listening, and thank you for your support of this Indiegogo campaign to bring these amazing letters back to life. Thank you.